The night the lights went out. December 14th, 2017, 2:47 a.m. The lights in cell block 4B flickered, then went out. For a few seconds, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just the kind of silence that makes your heart race faster than your thoughts. Then a scream. It wasn't the sound of a man in pain. It was the sound of a man losing his mind. Officer Daniels froze. He was standing in the corridor, flashlight trembling in his hand. The emergency lights had failed, leaving only a faint red glow bleeding through the steel doors. He radioed for backup. No response. The static felt louder than the silence. Down the hallway, something slammed against the bars. Then another. Then another. One by one, the inmates started pounding their doors, not to break free, but to be heard, to remind themselves that they still existed. Daniels knew this feeling too well. He'd been stationed at Rikers for 6 years. And no matter how much armor you wore, the badge, the uniform, the training, this place found a way to crawl inside your head. It wasn't the violence that got to him. It was the silence that followed. When power finally returned, Daniels walked towards cell 23, the source of the first scream. Inside was an inmate named Marcus Bell. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at the wall, whispering something over and over again. Daniels leaned closer, trying to hear. Marcus wasn't talking to him. He was talking to someone who wasn't there. That night, Daniels didn't sleep. He sat in the break room, staring at the wall clock ticking louder than usual. He realized something most guards at Rikers never admitted out loud. The silence in here didn't belong to the inmates. It belonged to the island. And once you heard it, it followed you home. This story took weeks to piece together from real accounts inside Rikers Island. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, subscribe now. Because what happens inside these walls rarely matters. It out alive. Back to the beginning. To understand what really happened that night, you need to understand Rikers Island itself. A place built on 1,000 acres of landfill, surrounded by cold water and rusted fences. It was supposed to be temporary, a solution for overcrowding in New York's jails. But over time, it became something else. A forgotten city of concrete and fear. Every block had its own rhythm. The clang of steel, the shouts from the yard, the endless roll call of numbers instead of names. And yet, in between all that noise, there was always a silence that hung in the air, a silence that could break a man faster than any punishment. Inside the walls, Marcus Bell was one of those men. He'd been at Rikers for 3 years, waiting for a trial that never seemed to come. They said he was dangerous, unpredictable. But what broke him wasn't the fights or the isolation. It was the waiting, the endless days with nothing but a wall to talk to. He started hearing whispers, soft at first, then louder. The guard said he was just losing it. But Daniels, he wasn't so sure. He'd seen it before. Inmates hearing things, seeing things. Sometimes even guards claimed they heard whispers too, voices echoing through empty corridors at night. One rookie once asked Daniels, "Do you think this place is haunted?" Daniels looked him in the eye and said, "No, haunted means something died here. Rikers doesn't kill you. It makes you forget you were alive." The breaking point. The longer Marcus stayed in that cell, the quieter he became. He stopped eating, stopped talking, just sat there, motionless, staring through the cracks in the wall like he was looking into another world. When the riot alarms went off that December night, Daniels thought it was just another fight in the yard. But then he heard that scream, Marcus's scream, a sound that didn't come from fear or pain. It came from somewhere deeper. The medical team said it was a psychological break. But Daniels knew better. He'd seen that look before, the look of someone who had stared into the silence too long and finally cracked. The guard's secret. Here's the part no one outside Rikers likes to talk about. Even the guards fear the silence. When you walk those halls at 3 a.m., you feel like something's always watching. Not a person, but the place itself. The air feels heavy, like it's breathing with you. Daniels once told his wife he could still hear the doors clanging in his sleep. That every time the house got quiet, his chest tightened. That's when she started sleeping with the TV on. Not because she liked the noise, but because she feared the silence too. The unanswered question. After Marcus's breakdown, he was transferred to the mental observation unit. But Daniels never saw him again. Rumor was, Marcus stopped responding completely. No words, no sounds, just silence. And yet, every night, when Daniels walked past that empty cell, he swore he could still hear a whisper. Faint, distant, like Marcus was still there, talking through the walls. Some guards said it was just his mind playing tricks. Others said it was something else, something Rikers didn't want anyone to talk about. But one thing's for sure, on that island, silence isn't peace. It's pressure. And every man, guard or inmate, eventually breaks under it. As dawn broke over Rikers Island, the city skyline glowed gold across the East River. The world outside was waking up. But inside those walls, the silence remained. Heavy, endless, alive. Officer Daniels walked the corridor one last time before clocking out. He paused outside Marcus's old cell. For a moment, it was completely quiet. Then tap. A soft sound, like a finger against concrete. One tap, then two. Daniels froze. Because the pattern, it wasn't random. It was Morse code. And though he couldn't understand it, one word came to his mind. Help. To be continued. The tapping in the walls. December 16th, 2017, 3:12 a.m. The tapping started again. This time, Daniels wasn't alone. Officer Ruiz, a newer guard with only 5 months on the job, froze when he heard it too. The sound was faint, like someone lightly knocking on metal from inside a wall. 3 slow taps, a pause, then 2 more. Ruiz turned to Daniels. You hear that? Daniels nodded slowly. He'd been hearing it for 2 nights straight, always around the same time, always from the same cell block. The prison camera showed nothing. The logbook said that block was empty, but the sound kept coming. He gripped his flashlight and walked down the hallway, boots echoing softly against the concrete. The lights above flickered, as if warning him not to keep going. When he reached cell 23, Marcus Bell's old cell, the tapping stopped. Ruiz whispered, "Man, this place gives me the creeps." Daniels didn't respond. He just stood there, staring through the bars at the cold, empty space where Marcus once sat for hours, whispering to the walls. Then, just as Ruiz started to back away, a voice, soft, hoarse, and distant, came from inside the cell. It said one word, Daniels. Ruiz's flashlight hit the floor. The beam rolled across the ground, shaking from his trembling hands. But when Daniels stepped closer, there was no one inside. Just the walls. Just the silence. To understand how things reached this point, you have to go back to before Marcus broke, back when Rikers was already boiling from the inside. In early 2017, Rikers Island was drowning in chaos. Overcrowding, staff shortages, inmates left in their cells for days without showers or sunlight. Even the guards were cracking under the pressure. Daniels had seen men come to work clean-shaven and leave with shaking hands. One officer quit mid-shift after an inmate threw a tray at him for handing out the wrong meal. Another guard suffered a panic attack while locking a solitary door. He swore he heard someone breathing over his shoulder when no one was there. The silence of the prison wasn't just an absence of noise. It was alive, like it had weight. Marcus Bell was already unstable before Rikers broke him. He'd been arrested for robbery gone wrong, caught in the wrong place with the wrong people. But inside, he wasn't the same as the others. While most men yelled, fought, or played cards to pass time, Marcus stayed quiet. He spent hours drawing on the walls with pencil stubs, faces, eyes, symbols. He once told another inmate that if you listen long enough, you could hear the island talking. At first, everyone laughed. Then one by one, people stopped laughing, because some of them did start hearing things too. The day before the blackout, Marcus told Daniels something strange. He said, "You ever wonder why the silence here feels heavy? Like it's pressing down?" Daniels asked him what he meant. Marcus smiled, a slow, broken smile, and said, "It's because this place remembers. Every scream, every secret. It doesn't forget. It just gets quiet." That night, Marcus was found staring at the wall, whispering again. And a day later, he was gone, transferred out, they said. But no paperwork ever showed up. Back in the present, Daniels sat in the control booth, watching the security feeds. Every hallway looked still, empty, calm. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The silence between the camera clicks sounded louder than ever. Then, from a speaker above the console, faint static, followed by the tapping again. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. Daniels leaned forward. Ruiz whispered, "Is that coming through the system? Daniels didn't answer. He picked up the radio, switched to the guard frequency, and tapped his finger on the table, mimicking the same rhythm. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. The sound stopped immediately. For about 10 seconds, there was nothing. Then, a reply. This time, the taps came from somewhere behind the control booth wall. Ruiz stood up fast. "I'm done, bro. I'm not staying here." He walked toward the exit, but Daniel stayed seated, his heart pounding. He whispered under his breath, "Marcus?" No response. Just a single tap. Soft. Slow. Final. That morning, when the day shift arrived, Daniels filed a maintenance report claiming he'd heard pipes rattling due to cold weather. He didn't mention Marcus's name. He didn't mention the tapping. But he couldn't stop thinking about that one whisper, his name, echoing from an empty cell. When he clocked out and walked toward the ferry off Rikers, the city skyline shimmered in the morning haze. The sound of traffic, waves, gulls, it all felt too normal. But as he waited on the dock, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered. Nothing. Just faint static. Then, tap, 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 pause, tap, tap. He dropped the phone. The same rhythm. The same message. The same silence. That night, Daniels didn't go home. He sat in his car outside the facility, watching the fog roll over the water. The island was dark, silent, and distant, just the way it always looked from the outside. But he knew better. Inside, something was awake, and it was calling him back. The whisper through the walls. December 17th, 2017, 2:41 a.m. The walls were whispering again. Officer Daniels stood in the center of the solitary wing, flashlight trembling in his hand. Every sound felt alive, the hum of the flickering light, the low groan of steel bars expanding in the cold. He'd come back on his night off. He told the shift supervisor he left his badge behind. That was a lie. He came back because he needed to know. The whisper had followed him home, soft, dragging, and human. It echoed in the pipes, through the vents, and now, back here, it sounded clearer than ever. A voice. Slow. Broken. Whispering his name. Daniels. He froze. It was the same voice from Marcus Bell's cell. He pointed his flashlight toward the source, cell 23. The same one the record still said was empty. But tonight, there was a shadow sitting on the bed. "Who's in there?" Daniels called out. No answer. Just a slow inhale, and the faint scratch of fingernails against concrete. He moved closer, boots echoing across the cold floor. The beam of light swept across the bars, and there it was, the wall, covered in markings, names, dates, symbols. At the center, written in something dark, were the words, "Listen closely." 2 days earlier, the entire block had lost power for 6 minutes. In those 6 minutes, 3 inmates screamed from their cells, claiming they saw someone walking the tier, someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Each of them described the same man. Bald head, orange jumpsuit, tattoo under his left eye. Marcus Bell. But Marcus was gone. Transferred. At least, that's what the report said. Daniels kept replaying the last time he spoke to Marcus. It was a quiet afternoon in the mess hall. Marcus had refused his food again. Daniels walked by his table, trying to lighten the mood. "Gotta eat something, Bell." Marcus didn't look up. He was tracing circles on the table with his finger. Then he said, "You ever think about what happens to sound when it dies?" Daniels frowned. "Sound doesn't die. It fades." Marcus smiled. "No, not here. Here it stays. Every scream, every cry just sinks into the concrete." He tapped the table. "You can still hear it, if you listen." That was 2 days before the incident. Now, standing in the dim light of cell 23, Daniels pressed his palm to the cold wall. It was vibrating, faintly, rhythmically. Ruiz, who had reluctantly followed him back, whispered, "Man, this is insane. We shouldn't be here." Daniels didn't answer. He pressed his ear to the wall. Static. Then, a voice muffled and distant. "They're still here." He stumbled back. "What did you say?" Ruiz shook his head. "I didn't say anything." The sound grew clearer, like a radio slowly tuning in. Daniels, they never left. Ruiz bolted. He ran down the hallway and out of the block, leaving Daniels alone with the voice. The lights flickered again. The whispering turned into a low hum, vibrating through the floor and ceiling. And then, in a flash of silence, total stillness. Everything stopped. The next morning, Ruiz didn't show up for roll call. No one could reach him. His locker was empty. Daniel sat in the break room, staring at the security footage from the night before. He fast-forwarded through hours of empty hallways, until the moment the lights flickered. Frame by frame, he slowed it down. And there, for 1 second, he saw it. A figure, standing inside cell 23. Still, head tilted toward the camera. The image was grainy, but the face, it was unmistakable. Marcus Bell. Daniels leaned back, heart pounding. He rewound the footage. Played it again. This time, the cell was empty. He rubbed his face, shaking his head. No, this can't be real. But it was. Because when he closed the laptop, there it was again. That faint, dragging whisper. Right behind him. Daniels. He turned fast. Nothing. The room was empty. Just the coffee machine humming. The dull sound of distant clanging gates. But then something caught his eye. A small folded note under his coffee mug. It wasn't there before. He unfolded it. A single line was scrawled across the paper. Meet me where it started. He froze. Because he knew exactly where that was. The old solitary wing, where Marcus spent his final weeks. That night, Daniels didn't tell anyone where he was going. He grabbed his flashlight, signed in, and walked toward the abandoned section. Wing D3. It was sealed off months ago after flooding and electrical issues. No lights. No working cameras. Just darkness and memories. The air was thick with the smell of mold and rust. His boots splashed through shallow puddles as he made his way down the corridor. He stopped at the last cell. Marcus's old room. On the wall, barely visible through the grime, were the same words. Listen closely. He took a deep breath and whispered, I'm here. Nothing. Then, a low groan from the pipes above, followed by a whisper that crawled across the walls. You shouldn't have come back. Daniels dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, lighting up the inside of the cell. And for the briefest second, he saw a hand. Pale. Motionless. Pressed against the wall from the inside. The lights flickered on across the block. Daniel spun around. The hallway was empty. But when he turned back toward the cell, the handprint was gone. Only the whisper remained. And for the first time, he couldn't tell if it was in the air or inside his own head. The sound that shouldn't exist. December 18th, 2017, 3:13 a.m. The sound came again. Not a whisper this time. Not words. It was something between a hum and a heartbeat. Deep, uneven, and coming from beneath the floor. Officer Daniels stood motionless in the middle of Wing D3, flashlight flickering against the concrete walls. The air was thick, wet, alive with the same vibration that had haunted him for weeks. He muttered to himself, It's just pipes, it's just old pipes. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't, because the sound was rhythmic, like someone breathing through the walls. Hours earlier, in the control room, Captain Rivera was watching the monitor feeds when the audio on one of the old channels came back online for the first time in months. D3, the sealed-off wing. There shouldn't have been any signal there. No cameras. No power. But somehow, there was. The screen showed nothing but static, yet faintly, through the distortion, came the sound of breathing. Rivera frowned. He leaned closer. Then came the faint metallic scrape of a door hinge, followed by 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Rivera froze. His hand hovered over the radio. Control to D3. Anyone down there? No response. He tried again, voice lower. Control to Daniels. Are you in D3? Still nothing. Just that steady breathing through the static. Down in the wing, Daniels pressed his ear against the wall. The sound grew sharper, like metal grinding against metal. He lifted his flashlight, scanning the floor, until the beam landed on a drain cover half buried in grime. The noise was coming from below it. He crouched down, running his fingers along the cold metal. It was sealed with rust. He pried at it with his keys until the lid came loose, and a faint draft of air rushed out, cold enough to make his eyes water. The sound got louder, deeper, like something alive. He whispered, "Who's down there?" Then from the drain, a voice. Soft, broken, familiar. "Daniels, you found it." He stumbled back, almost tripping over his flashlight. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his fingertips. That voice. He knew it. Marcus Bell. But Marcus was gone. Officially transferred. No record of his death. Just gone. Daniels backed away from the drain, whispering, "You're not real. You're not real." The sound grew louder, turning into words. "You left me here." He shook his head violently. "No, I didn't." Then a hand tapped the underside of the drain. Once. Twice. The light flickered. Upstairs, Rivera slammed his radio down. "We've got movement in D3. I want 2 officers down there right now." But when they reached the entrance, the security lock didn't budge. "We can't open it, sir. The system says it's already unlocked." Rivera frowned. "Already unlocked? Then why won't it?" And then, from the speaker, came the sound of static turning into words. "Don't come in." Everyone froze. "Who said that?" Rivera demanded. No response. He grabbed the override key and turned it manually. The heavy gate creaked open with a screech that echoed down the corridor. Inside, their flashlights cut through the darkness. Puddles, dust, and silence. "Daniels," Rivera called out. Nothing. They moved deeper in, until one of the guards whispered, "Sir, you need to see this." He was pointing at the wall of cell 23. Fresh writing. Still dripping. IT was never empty. Meanwhile, Daniels was still in the lower section, crawling through a narrow maintenance passage under the drain. The air was thick with moisture and dust. The smell of rust burned his throat. He moved slowly, flashlight trembling in his grip, until he saw a faint amber light up ahead. A small, half-flooded chamber. And on the far wall, chains. His breath caught. There were names scratched into the metal plates bolted to the wall. Dozens of them, all belonging to inmates who were supposedly transferred or released. And then, one more name carved deeper than the rest. M. Bell. Daniels dropped his flashlight. The beam rolled across the water, casting shadows that looked like faces. Then he heard again, breathing, right behind him. He turned slowly. Nothing. Just the sound of dripping water. He picked up the flashlight and froze. There were footprints leading back the way he came. Wet. Fresh. Up above, Rivera's team finally made it to the maintenance level. "Check every corner," he ordered. One of the guards shined his light into the drain passage. "Captain, there's water moving down there." Rivera leaned down to look, and that's when they all heard it. A faint voice echoing through the tunnel. "Don't come down here." The guards looked at each other. "Sir, that's Daniels." Rivera shouted back, "Daniels, are you hurt?" No reply. Just the slow rhythm of the same hum that had haunted every hallway for weeks. Boom, 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 like a pulse trapped inside the concrete. Hours later, when they finally pulled Daniels out of that crawl space, he wasn't the same. His uniform was soaked, hands trembling, eyes wide open. "Daniels," Rivera said quietly, "what happened down there?" Daniels didn't answer. He just stared ahead, whispering under his breath. Rivera leaned closer. "Say that again." Daniels blinked slowly and whispered, "He never left. He's still here." The official report said Daniels suffered a psychological break due to stress and lack of sleep. He was placed on leave and transferred to a mental health unit for evaluation. But 2 nights later, the same noise started again. That low hum, the breathing in the pipes. And when Rivera returned to D3, the words, "Listen closely," had been freshly scratched into the wall again. Underneath it, a new line appeared, carved deep, almost violently. He never left. The last shift, January 6th, 2018, 11:47 p.m. The storm outside was the kind that made the city feel like it was being washed clean. But inside Rikers, nothing ever felt clean. The rain hit the windows like a warning, but Rivera stayed. He couldn't leave, not after what he saw, not after what Daniels said. He needed answers. The wing, D3, had been sealed again, but Rivera had the override key. And one last night before his transfer, he told himself this was just a check for maintenance issues. But in truth, he wanted to hear for himself. The elevator groaned as it descended. The power lights flickered, and when the doors opened, silence. That heavy, suffocating Riker silence. He walked the corridor slowly, his boots echoing against the wet floor. Every cell door was rusted shut, every window blacked out. Then came that sound again, that heartbeat, that deep hum in the concrete. Rivera clenched his jaw. "Show yourself," he whispered. The lights above him blinked once, twice, And then the hallway filled with a noise he couldn't explain, like 1,000 whispers overlapping, all saying the same name. Bell, Bell, Bell. He aimed his flashlight towards cell 23, the same cell with the writing on the wall. This time, the words were different, fresher, carved deep, as if someone had done it with bare hands. Every sound you hear, is someone still here? Rivera stepped closer. The air felt heavy, like breathing through smoke. He reached out, fingertips grazing the cold wall, and suddenly the flashlight died. Darkness. The hum grew louder, faster, turning into something like a human heartbeat pounding inside the floor. He pulled out his radio. Control, this is Rivera. I need immediate. The radio cut out. Then a whisper, inches from his ear. You open the door. They found Rivera's radio hours later. No sign of him. Just a wet boot print leading to the maintenance drain. And carved into the metal plate beside it, barely visible under the rust. The island breathes. Weeks passed. New guards came. Old ones left. But the same sounds continued, at night between shifts in the silence. Some said it was the pipes. Others said it was the weight of all the pain, violence, and memories trapped in those walls, echoing back like ghosts that refused to rest. But every officer who's worked that wing will tell you the same thing. There's something under Rikers Island that doesn't forget. Not the screams. Not the lies. Not the ones who vanished. And maybe that's the truth about places like Rikers. They don't just hold prisoners. They hold energy. Every cry, every secret, every ounce of madness that ever passed through those halls stays buried beneath the concrete, waiting. So when you hear that hum in the silence, that faint pulse in the pipes, remember this. It's not the building settling. It's not the wind. It's the sound of a place that remembers everything we try to forget. Rikers Island isn't just a prison. It's a reflection of what happens when punishment outlives the crime, where walls become witnesses and silence becomes alive. Because some places don't die when the lights go out. They breathe, they wait, and they remember.